The night was unusually still in South Dallas, the kind of quiet that felt heavy in the air. Streetlights flickered across the cracked pavement as a soft hum from passing cars faded into the distance. At the edge of the city stood the Lone Star Inn, a small, forgotten motel with fading paint and a neon sign that buzzed more than it glowed. It was the kind of place people used when they didn't want to be found, where cash payments and fake names were part of the routine. That night, Room 19 had a new guest. The man checked in just before midnight, paid in worn bills, and signed the ledger with handwriting too neat to seem real. The clerk didn't ask questions, he never did. Most of his customers didn't stay long enough to bother remembering. The man walked down the dim hallway, carrying a small duffel bag, and closed the door behind him. The sound of the lock clicking echoed faintly through the thin walls. Hours later, a single light flickered through the half-drawn curtains of Room 19, but no one noticed. The night passed without disturbance, only the faint creak of the old building shifting in the wind. It wasn't until the morning that something felt wrong. The maid Maria knocked on the door for cleaning. There was no response. When she pushed the door open, the air inside felt strange, thick and metallic. What she saw froze her in place. Blood had soaked through the motel carpet, seeping into dark stains that spread across the floor. On the bed lay a man's body, lifeless and still. His head was missing. The sheets were twisted as if there had been a struggle, and the walls were marked with streaks of blood. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken windows, and no footprints leading away. Whoever had done this had moved with eerie precision. Police arrived within minutes, sealing off the scene. The only clue was a wallet placed neatly on the nightstand. Inside were a driver's license and a few crumpled bills belonging to Evan Morris, a mechanic from Fort Worth. The sight puzzled detectives. Why would a killer leave such clear identification? As investigators combed through the scene, they found that the motel's security cameras had been disabled hours before the murder. The wires were cut cleanly, as if by someone who knew exactly where to find them. There were no fingerprints, no weapon, no trail. The man in Room 19 had been murdered quietly, almost surgically. By the end of the day, one thing was certain. This wasn't just another motel crime. It was something far darker. Evan Morris had always been an ordinary man living an uneventful life in Fort Worth. He worked long hours at a local auto shop, fixing cars and keeping to himself. Neighbors recalled seeing him leave early in the morning and return late at night, always alone, always quiet. He wasn't the kind of person to attract attention. That's what made the discovery of his wallet in a brutal murder scene so strange. Nothing about Evan's life suggested he could be part of something so gruesome. Detectives began their investigation by visiting his small apartment. The place was neat but lifeless, as if no one had lived there for weeks. His clothes were still hanging in the closet. His car was parked outside and his phone lay on the kitchen counter with several missed calls. It looked as though Evan had simply vanished. The last time anyone had seen him was 3 weeks before the murder. He had told a coworker he was taking a few days off to sort things out, but never said what that meant. The motel record showed that Room 19 had been booked with a prepaid card under a false name. Surveillance footage from a nearby gas station showed a man resembling Evan buying that same card, but the video was too grainy to confirm. The man wore a baseball cap and sunglasses, hiding most of his face. Investigators started to wonder if Evan had been planning something, or if someone was trying hard to make it look like he had. Forensics brought another twist. The fingerprints, found on the motel door and inside the room, didn't match Evan's at all. When the medical examiner compared the body's prints to official records, a new name emerged: Aaron Mitchell. He was a missing man from Dallas, gone for nearly 3 years. Aaron had a troubled past filled with debts and dangerous connections. He'd once been accused of stealing from a local gang before disappearing without a trace. Now it seemed he had resurfaced, only to die in one of the most disturbing murders the city had seen. Detectives were faced with a chilling question. If the dead man wasn't Evan, then why was Evan's wallet there? Was he a victim, a suspect, or something in between? The mystery deepened with every clue, turning what seemed like a random killing into a puzzle that didn't fit any familiar pattern. As investigators dug deeper into the tangled history between Evan Morris and Aaron Mitchell, a picture of two men living parallel lives began to emerge. Both had worked at the same auto body shop in Fort Worth, nearly 4 years earlier. They weren't friends, but they had shared long shifts and quiet lunches in the break room. Evan was the type who kept his head down, while Aaron was known for taking risks, fast cars, fast money, and the wrong kind of company. Rumors spread that Aaron had started taking side jobs fixing stolen vehicles for a local gang. Eventually, he disappeared after being accused of stealing a large amount of cash from the same people he worked for. Police found out that shortly after Aaron's disappearance, Evan's life had changed drastically. He quit his job, broke off contact with most of his coworkers, and began taking private repair jobs out of his small garage. At first, detectives thought he might have been dragged into Aaron's criminal world. But then a witness came forward, a gas station attendant who claimed he saw two men in a black pickup truck confronting Evan a few weeks before the motel murder. The men, he said, looked angry and kept asking about someone named AM before driving off. Investigators began to suspect that the killers who had once hunted Aaron had mistaken Evan for him. The two men shared similar builds, and from a distance they could easily be confused. But that theory began to unravel when new evidence surfaced. A traffic camera caught footage of Evan's car leaving the motel parking lot, just hours after the murder took place. The driver's face was obscured by a dark hoodie, but his posture and the way he moved looked eerily like Evan's. The discovery sent the investigation spinning in a new direction. If Evan had truly been at the motel that night, it meant he might not have been a victim at all. It meant he could have been there when Aaron was killed, or worse, that he was the one who had done it. The possibility shifted everything. Suddenly, the quiet mechanic who lived an invisible life had become the central figure in a crime that seemed more deliberate than accidental. The story of mistaken identity began to blur into something much darker, a revenge that had been years in the making. The discovery of Evan's car leaving the motel transformed the case from confusion to calculated intent. Detectives retraced his movements in the days before and after the murder, hoping to find a pattern. What they found was even more unsettling. Surveillance cameras along the highway captured Evan's car heading south toward Waco, the morning after the killing. 2 days later, it was found abandoned at a rest stop, the doors unlocked and the keys still in the ignition. Inside were blood traces later confirmed to belong to Aaron Mitchell, and a motel key tag marked with the faded number 19. The evidence suggested that Evan hadn't been a random victim. He had planned the meeting, lured Aaron to that motel, and made sure no one could see what happened next. When police returned to his apartment for a second search, they uncovered a small metal box hidden beneath loose floorboards. Inside were several $1,000s in cash, 3 fake identification cards under different names, and a burner phone filled with text messages that painted a clear picture of obsession and betrayal. One message stood out. "He took everything from me. I'm taking it back." The text dated back months, showing Evan's slow descent into resentment. He had been tracking Aaron for weeks, using fake online profiles to gather information about his whereabouts. The messages hinted that Aaron had resurfaced, trying to reconnect with old contacts for money. Evan must have seen an opportunity, a chance to settle a score that had haunted him for years. Investigators believed Evan contacted Aaron under a false name, pretending to offer a job and a safe place to hide from his enemies. The meeting was arranged at the Lone Star Inn, where Aaron walked straight into a trap. The brutality of the murder now made sense. It wasn't impulsive. It was controlled, fueled by a deep need for vengeance. Evan had waited years to confront the man who had betrayed him. The missing head, police theorized, could have been an attempt to delay identification or destroy evidence of the real victim. By the time authorities pieced everything together, Evan was already gone. His careful planning, the fake identities, and the calculated timing of his disappearance all pointed to one truth. He had planned not just the killing, but his escape. Months turned into years, and the name Evan Morris became a ghost in police files. Detectives followed every possible lead, from rural motels in Texas to border towns near Mexico, but each trail ended the same way, in silence. One report came from a truck driver who swore he saw a man resembling Evan hitching a ride outside El Paso. Another came from a motel clerk who remembered renting a room to someone using one of Evan's old aliases. Yet none of the sightings could ever be confirmed. It was as if he had vanished completely, leaving behind nothing but a story too disturbing to forget. The case began to fade from the headlines, replaced by newer crimes and fresher scandals. But for those who had worked the investigation, it never really went away. Detectives often revisited the files, hoping a new piece of evidence might surface. A bank withdrawal, a fingerprint, anything that could explain how one man had managed to outsmart everyone. What haunted them most was how meticulous the plan had been. Evan wasn't a professional criminal, yet his actions showed precision. He had cut the motel cameras, used fake IDs, and disappeared without leaving a digital trace. It was as though the quiet mechanic had spent years learning how to erase himself. Some investigators believed Evan had crossed into Mexico, trading his old life for anonymity in some small border town. Others thought he hadn't made it that far, that maybe the same people Aaron had stolen from eventually caught up with him. A few even whispered that Evan had taken his own life, unable to live with the weight of what he'd done, but no evidence ever confirmed any of it. The truth remained locked away, just out of reach. In 2016, the Lone Star Inn was torn down after years of disuse, its walls collapsing into piles of dust and broken brick. Yet locals still spoke about Room 19 as if it carried a curse. Some swore they heard voices near the empty lot at night, faint echoes of the crime that once shocked the city. Others simply avoided the area, unwilling to be reminded of the story that never found an ending. Whether it was a case of mistaken identity or an act of cold-blooded revenge, the Dallas Motel Beheading became a legend, a grim reminder that sometimes the most ordinary people hide the darkest secrets.